All right, looks like we're live for another CutSec ICS Friday Infosec chat. So welcome everybody that's joining us from LinkedIn, from YouTube, and this is just a 30-minute chat about just about anything. Hopefully we'll talk about ICS. I'll try to steer everything towards ICS. There might be a little bit of InfoSec in there, but I've asked Jeff Shearer to join us. Looks like Matt's jumped on. We might have a few other people jumping on. If you have any comments, if you're in LinkedIn and YouTube, go ahead and ask your comments. We do see them. They will stream up for us, and we can answer them as we're going. I'll keep an eye on that. If we don't respond in the comments, obviously we're going to try to respond here. LinkedIn, you won't see our responses from our comments, so we'll make sure we'll try to do them verbally. So anybody jump in, ask questions. That's what we're here for. We do have an agenda. I know everybody likes to see a little bit of an agenda. I do like to talk about what Cutaway Security is doing. So this week, working with some of our customers, as I mentioned, doing some threat monitoring and architecture review for an OSI soft Pi installation. The threat modeling around that, it was pretty interesting looking at their documentations. First of all, they had good documentation, they had good networking and stuff like that. So I was impressed about that. They wrote it up well, and then but pulling out information from that. I like the fact that they actually included in there, and it was their security team, writing in there, their concerns about different areas that Pi was, how they were configuring and administrating the Pi, the relationship between Active Directory and the Pi Windows integrated security, and the fact that there's some relationship configurations that, that's what we like to take advantage of from the security standpoint, are those relationships, and seeing how we're going to do that. So I noted some of that. There's a lot of API interactions between a bunch of different servers. For those of you that aren't familiar with management servers within an OT environment, it's not just a server. It's a system of systems, system of servers, of object servers, everything has its own job. And so configuring those correctly can be complex. And that's why we do these things. That's why we looked at these different things to help them understand those relationships. And that's why we do the penetration testing, because a lot of times you don't realize while you might have secured the operating systems and stuff like that, understanding how different things interact with each other, that can be difficult to secure, and threat actors will manipulate that. And so pen tests are designed to understand that manipulation of those unusual configurations. And then finally, and Jeff, you might be able to talk about this. I've asked Jeff to join me. He's got a lot of familiarization with OT environments. Mm-hmm. One of the things that the client told me very specifically is, hey, I asked him, what is the thing that you're most concerned about? And I thought it was modifying the data, the live sensor data. If I can get in there, man in the middle of it, change it and stuff like that. And they're like, that would be bad. But what would be really bad is if you could manipulate the tag data that mm-hmm. was used to, storing the information and referencing the information. That was more critical. They were more worried about that. So we're going to focus on that. What's your experience around that, Jeff?
So definitely, first of all, my name is Jeff Shearer. I had the pleasure of working with Don in a couple of different exercises, and he is also a fellow SANS instructor, but have about 37 years of automating factories and work running around the world doing that. So I do have comments about tags. And so tag values a lot of times are being pulled from the lower levels. And if you can get or set those tag values in a bad way, or let's call it a nefarious way, then a lot of times there's encrypted tunnels, or there's nice secure tunnels to put bad things in one end and let it traverse up and get stored and archived everywhere. And so I understand they say, like, hey, I'm not so worried about you manipulating a physical sensor, but if you can get to the tag values and let that propagate in a nasty way, that is a relevant conversation to have with somebody. And so how do you protect against that? That's a more than a 30-minute conversation. But yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of like that workflow, which is the You enter data somewhere and it goes to a location, it gets input, whether it's in a flat file or a database, and it doesn't really have a negative impact right there. But as soon as it starts going down the workflow into other systems, it can have an impact. And so that's going to be interesting to see when we go on site and do our actual testing. So thanks for that input, and thanks for introducing yourself. I completely
oh, no worries, that not at all.
Went
It's
right
all good.
by that.
You and I know each other, so just chatting, this is just kind of like chatting, so it's all good.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things that it really interested me about some of the stuff that you do, Jeff and Matt, please pop in with any questions. Chicken farms. So there's obviously automation in chicken farms, and basically I would assume that a lot of it has to do with the packaging, the processing of the chicken and the packaging and stuff like that. So can you help people understand, farms, chicken farms? What?
Can I interject before
ahead,
poultry
Matt.
becomes the focus? Jeff, can you give more context to tag data?
Sure.
Don't use the word tag data.
Yeah, absolutely.
Explain tag data.
So there is memory, like we all kind of understand memory, how it's allocated in a computer system. In embedded systems or OT systems, those are same memory allocations, and some of them are being written to by actual sensor data. Some of them are used for computational data, like what's 5 times 5 equals, so it's constantly being written as computational data. There's recipe data. Hey, if I'm going to make a bun and I only have brown sugar versus white sugar or flour, different flour types, is you change those recipes. So there's recipe data, there's calibration data, there's different things like that, and it's held within these embedded systems memory space. And what happens is if you can get in and manipulate that memory and realize what the clients are doing with it and reading it and storing it, like for instance, let's say I'm processing poultry, I'm processing Little Green Army Men, or I'm processing Coca-Cola, is I need to have genealogy of what I did to make that product, and then it's stored. And a lot of times it's brought off board to something like an OSI Pi server. And so if I can make that data bad and then it just gets consumed and propagated, that's what I'm talking about as far as tags. So in the OT world, we talk about things as tags because our vendors have said, what's the tag name or what's the tag values? So they've kind of used that overloaded word to mean memory locations. So, yeah.
Awesome. Great question, Matt.
Yep.
So Jeff, getting back, Matt, is it okay to go to chicken farms now?
Let it go.
Let's clarify. So I act as a automation officer for a process cooling company, and they just so happens that they are in chicken plants or poultry plants and meat plants, and they do also government work to cool laser guided all kinds of stuff. So I try to make a very good point that we spend a lot of time on energy sector and gas sectors and these things, and I say, how many people actually eat poultry? And everybody in the audience raises their hands, and I said, this is an underserved group of people with a lot of automation, with a lot of impact on, if they get their security wrong, then we don't eat. And I joke, I say we're 3 meals away from total anarchy. So if you've ever ran into anybody who's not eaten 3 meals or missed 3 meals, they're ready to go out in the backyard and start shooting bunnies and eating anything they can or eating the grass, right? So I spend time in that community just because it's very underserved. And there's a lot of automation with a lot of legacy equipment that isn't protected. And number 2 is folks like, it's probably on our list, they're dreaming about going to Google or cutaway security, or they're dreaming about going somewhere else. But if you look at the parking lot, you say, if I ended up in the chicken farm parking lot, I probably made some bad life decisions, right? So the point being is, it is part of the identified security sectors, of agriculture that falls under, and we don't give it a lot of attention. And so there is a lot of automated processes that occur in all of these plants, plants meaning factories or whatever, and live birds are coming in. And if I shut that down, I can't just like stop oil or stop gas or stop producing. Like, these are live animals that need to be, dealt with. And so it's a high pressure environment that shows like uptime is very, very important, and the security of that is very, very important, but it doesn't really get the attention that it deserves. So
Well,
these are live animals, so that's telling us where in the process we're focusing on.
yeah. It's like the farms themselves have a lot of automation, everything from in shell, giving vaccines as it's moving to all the way through the chicken delivery of the products to feed them, to getting them to a processing plant, to dealing with it, and you only have so long to cool it and package it. And so it's an amazing environment, actually.
Yeah. So yeah, environmental controls is environmental controls the most important part of that, or what would you say?
It's the whole thing, man. It's everything from how do you take feathers off to how do you get it processed out the back and into something that hasn't spoiled, or that has the right pH, or is handled salmonella wise, because every time you cut a piece you have to deal with salmonella. And so it's an amazing environment. Now, again, you can correlate that to many other industries. It just so happened that I always, whenever around Don, I'm talking about poultry, because I'm trying to lobby folks who have an industrial or have an IT background to help the OT crowd, because they need help in large ways to leverage security firms to help them get out of this kind of predicament. And we will feel that if we don't, because we won't eat. So, you know, and you can relate that to potato chip factories, to eyeglass and eye lens wear, and all kinds of things are automated, right?
Absolutely. So, and that's the whole point, is that, and that's the great thing about this industry, is that you learn certain things, and it applies to different sectors. I mean, there's so many questions and different ways I want to go down the rabbit hole, but I do want to kind of keep you on that OT perspective. So, can you kind of talk about like what a normal day for like programming, like because you do a lot of engineering on the OT side.
I do.
Can you kind of help people understand what your day is like there, and you're programming PLCs and stuff like that. Are you actually thinking about like the top 20 security recommendations for PLCs and stuff like that? So
yeah. So yeah, the first thing that precedes any of the top 20 things are, did I program the right thing, and did I program the thing right? And so the only way to know that is talking to mechanical and process experts to say, what is this thing is supposed to do? Like, if it's a coolant, or if it's a machine that makes Little Green Army Man, which I worked on before, or if it's spitting out transmissions for an automobile. We have to understand the process before we go through and just start programming. Now, a lot of us are cowboys, and we just start programming things until they work, but that is exactly the wrong approach. The second thing is if you can walk a mechanical or process engineer through normal use cases, but then make them start thinking about abuse cases. Well, hey, if I turn this valve and this valve on, Don and I were actually out on an exercise one time, and I didn't tell him specifically not to turn stuff on, and he did, and I had to go running to try and save the piece of equipment that he was about to ruin. But it is that, and he was thinking about it in an abuse case. I wonder if I do these things. And I had not relayed that information to him. And sure enough, I heard it was a particular crane, and I could hear the crane moving and I knew it was him. And I went running to save this piece of crane equipment, this miniature crane that we had built. And anyway, so the point of the day is, many years ago, we just thought about program until you're done, get it done. But now the biggest change in automation has not been the automation discipline, but it's been the connectivity mechanism. So going over Ethernet and connecting everything and everybody wanting information out. So now I have to think about working with Don or working with Matthew or whomever and saying, okay, here's my abuse cases, or here's my threat actors now, because everything is connected. So my job is much different every day, not only from a design perspective, mechanically and electrically and programming wise, but now I got to think about information connectivity, and that changes my day a lot. So I spend a lot more time thinking about from a security perspective.
Awesome. Yeah, I put the agenda away because we're going down. We've kind of hit everything that was on there. But if you guys have any questions on LinkedIn, on YouTube, please feel free to ask your questions. I'm monitoring that. But from the, and you brought up the fact that one of the things I kind of keyed on, and we've been talking about in the CutSec Cutaway Security Discord, is about jobs in the industry and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I constantly am encouraging people. I mean, we have a lot of people that are coming in. They want to do information security. Some of them have seen that it's kind of interesting to come into the OT information security side, and they're like, "What should I do?" And I'm like, go get a job, and I'm going to start saying, go to get a job at a chicken farm, go get a job at a chicken factory, and because they're like, okay, how do I get these experiences around, security and penetration testing and OT? And I'm like, well, you have to do it. And we all did that. That's how we actually got here. But it's kind of hard to say. So what are your thoughts around actually getting a job as, as an admin or learning how to do automation? So what are your recommendations around that, Jeff?
Yeah, and it's funny because the first time I went to a Cisco class, I walked around and I said, "Hey, where are you from?" And like nobody was from manufacturing, and so I knew I was different in so much as that I knew that switches, routers, firewalls, security was a career path, right? It's an entire career path, just like filling tanks or controlling pressures or doing automation is a career path. And now we're being asked to blend those two disciplines together because OT people traditionally are not trained in IT security, those disciplines. We hack things together, we connect switches together, and we think we've got it made. Whereas the folks on the IT side have gone through their professional routes, and it most cases precludes understanding what an industrial control system actually does. So there's a kind of a couple of ways to get that experience. One is I've seen mature companies start to partner IT staff with OT staff, and so there becomes this blended knowledge, kind of almost like cross training or whatever the buzzword of the day is. But it's generally at some point you actually have to put your hands on the equipment and start to learn it that way. There are some things that can be virtualized, like computer systems and stuff, but when it comes to like when Don turned the crane motor on, you have to hear it and you have to go, I know this is going to end badly if I don't stop this. So there's at some point you have to do physical things, and so we can't live in a virtualized world and expect somebody to be successful doing OT security if you're not in that environment. So it is challenging. Like for me, I went to a sulfuric acid plant, and my training was like, if there's a puddle, don't step in. If it's dripping, don't walk under it. Let's go. And so most IT folks are not wanting to walk around a sulfuric acid plant. It's just not on the wish list. But you learn so much from walking around the sulfuric acid plant of the criticality of and the real timeness of that word. And as Don is saying, if you really want to do this well, you're going to have to spend some time around a physical plant and do that. So you just can't get around it.
Yep. Hey, Matt, what are you doing this week? If you can talk about it.
Oh man.
Oh man.
Trying to secure space, believe it or not.
Secure. Like
outer space.
out as in the outer space.
Spacecraft.
Okay. So you're dealing with satellites, or you're dealing with
Nice.
And spacecraft, and yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, no, lots of stuff.
Well, I mean, and somebody had to remind me. So I was actually in, because when I was teaching one of my classes, I was lucky enough to have some people from NASA there, and they were like, Don, what do you think that the space station uses to connect all of its different modules? Those are controllers, and those are those are actuators, and so there's definitely controllers in space. There are endpoints in space. The International Space Station is has level 3, 2, and 1 and 0 environments, right?
Yeah.
So it's automation is everywhere. So that's pretty interesting. Awesome.
Also, I on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm doing some expert witness work on industrial mobility stuff. And I was having a really interesting conversation earlier about cyber physical systems, which ICS is included in that. And I put it bluntly, as you guys probably know this very well, cyber physical systems are the computers that can kill you. So just to put it into context, I love, Jeff, I love how well you put it into context. If you get it wrong, we don't eat.
Yes,
Thus,
that's right.
Death. And not death, but death miserable, because man, I don't want to be hungry.
Yeah, people's attitudes change if they're hungry, for sure. Kind of like that. There's a commercial about hangry or something like that. It's definitely it is true. And the things you were talking about, industrial mobility and customers wanting to stand in front of something and say, hey, I am definitely here, and safety wise this has to be enacted and stuff. That is another interesting field that's harder to solve. Even simple things like ceiling height changes, like where are you and what's the spray pattern, and is Jeff really in front of this thing? And so OT environments are challenging, and we need a community of people who are really bright and are, I would say the most successful ones are adventurous people. So, when they said, hey, you go to a sulfuric acid plant, I'm like, oh yeah, put me there. I want to go do that.
Oh, there's nothing like having safety posters where the glove is on but half the hand's missing and it's dripping.
Right.
There's an eye opener. I'm like, 3 days where? Since the last security incident.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's it has been an intellectual challenge for 37 years for me. And I walk in and it's like, how do they make bowling balls, or how do they make, green army men, or how do they make open heart valves or stuff. And so you're learning every time you engage with somebody. And I think you have to put humility out there, say like, put your pride in your back pocket, because I don't know how you make washers today, but I will by the end of the day and help you achieve your production goals, or I don't know how this happens. And so there's a certain amount of humility that comes along with, like, I don't know, I've been doing this a long time, but never been around this. So,
Yeah, the impacts of some of this stuff, we have so much influence associated with threats within our corporate environments, and they definitely touch the OT environments, but the consequences, learning about that, understanding that is unique in this arena. I'm never I need to reverse that. I'm always surprised at what I didn't think about as far as the consequences for, Jeff, you mentioned washers. How would that have a negative impact on things. So, but when you start thinking about what are yacht washers used for? Used for building systems, used for there's a whole supply chain issue. And so not only is there a supply chain issue for manufacturing, but then when you think about the supply chain issues associated with having a sensor or a PLC or a specific version of it, that can be a supply chain issue as well. Yeah. Do you have any experiences around that, Jeff? Like, something?
Yeah. So specifically, it was a long, long time ago when I went to my first cybersecurity thing. So I was like a puppy back then. The person told me, they said they manipulated an industrial control system to change stock prices. And I was like, they what? And they're like, oh yeah, they knew they could make these stock prices go down. So it was a manipulation based on that. So at that point in my life, I was young enough but old enough to understand stocks and prices, and like, did I care about it? Probably not. But I understood the power of when you can't produce a product at a profit, then that business goes out of business, right? And once I started understanding, like if I was standing on, I think it was Honda, I was working at Honda, and they said like how many dollars per minute if you shut this down, and you're going to be standing in front of this board and explaining like how you're not going to shut this line down anymore. And then it starts to reflect like, okay, it's a car, but it's, at that point it was Honda's bottom line. They're not making Accords at this plant anymore. And so the reality of what we do kind of affects you emotionally, as I should say. And yet we don't glamorize it at all or enough to say like, these are really important people. I remember hearing the pandemic thing about, man, people not wanting to go to one more Zoom meeting. And I had just gotten back from a poultry plant. And I said, there's a reality thing here of like, those essential workers didn't get to Zoom in or work at their house. They didn't get to do this. They were still cutting up chickens because people in pandemic land were still eating. And so the importance, it's like an upside down wedding cake. It's like, there's a lot of strain on people who still have to show up. And inside that is industrial control systems. And that market is actually going up because we've seen the labor market drop, and the importance of being able to automate, which is now the importance of connectivity, which is the importance of security. So it's all a strained model right now that it's really kind of amazing. So
are you sad that we've made your life and your jobs more complicated?
No, it's funny when I was working at Rockwell, so I had almost a 24-year career at Rockwell, and they had mentorship programs, and one of the guys was he says, so what does Rockwell sell? And I said, oh, controllers and drives. And he's like, no. He says, we sell efficiency and product quality and stuff like that. It's just our stuff. It looks like that, but this is what we're really selling. And so I think the pandemic has actually highlighted the problems of getting labor repeatability. So like, food don't go out the back. And so I think it's increased the market for automation, but it's strained the resources that exist that understand automation, uptime, and security. I think there's a massive gap in like folks like yourself and Matthew and the people that are probably on this call. It's like we're at a strain, and so training people and getting more of us to want to do it is a mission of mine for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and you're doing a great job at it. So we're right at, we're coming up on 30 minutes. Don't want to go over. This is just supposed to be a 30-minute chat. So, Matt, thanks for joining us. You've already introduced yourself. Jeff, where can people find you if they want to talk to you or reach out and talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I run my own company, Jeff at graymancyber.com. Grayman Cyber is a bit of how do I say it? A double entendre, obviously getting gray, but obviously trying to be in the background working. I do most of my work for SANS Institute, so you can find me Jay Shear at sans.org. and that's the best way to reach me.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate it. Matt, thanks for jumping on another call, and thank you to everybody that's viewing us on LinkedIn, on YouTube. Actually, we got promoted on the Simply Cyber show. So excellent streams and YouTube. Gerald does a lot of different things in the morning, some of the threat briefings, and I really enjoy that. So thank you for all of you that joined us here, and hopefully you enjoyed yourself for this 30-minute chat. Other than that, for everybody that wants to continue this conversation, we do have the Cutaway Security Discord channel. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll provide you an invite, and you can jump into the conversations there. Other than that, once again, Jeff and Matt, thank you both for joining us to talk to us about this. And I look forward to having you guys back in the future. Everybody have a great day and a fabulous weekend, and we'll talk to all of you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you, Jeff.
Nice to meet you.